Hey everyone, so I just wanted to do a quick run through our blueprint. As y'all have probably come to find out, the blueprint is the um, layout, the conventions of expectations. We've gone over that, of course, but it's really the meaty part. I mean, this is sort of I guess what some of you wish that I provided on day one for an assignment because this is the way that it is supposed to look by the time you're finished. Of course, we don't start with this because it can be a little overwhelming, and it's typically not the best way to begin in the writing process. So that's why we hold off until you have generated some writing and a rough draft and so on. So, but anyway, this is very important, and so I like to provide a video for that reason to just run down and run through it because this is basically how your paper should be laid out by the time you turn it in during final weeks. So first of all, I want to draw your attention up here. We are in the blueprint area, module 4 of unit 3, and I just want to draw your attention to these two handouts. Now, I'm going to open them up in a moment after I've gone through the visual explanation here. Um, as you know, that's how we always work this out in our units. There is a handout that if you prefer, the handout has it sort of like this without the pictures and without, uh, these images here. And so if you prefer that, you can download the handout right here. And I'm going to come back specifically to this outline template, and I want to explain that for just a moment. But first, let me walk you through this. Now, of course, we went through the introduction in full last week in our last module. We learned about using a hook and the different kinds of hooks that are typically employed and their techniques. And what we use this in our introduction for is that it's important to really gain your reader's interest, but it's also we're seeking to persuade in an argumentative paper, and so you're going to turn off half of your audience if you start with your argument, even a well formulated argument. So it's important to start with a hook, something that really grabs your reader's attention or draws them in and is an attractive. You'll remember last week I used the song "Yeah" from Usher as sort of a example of how we see this in a musical sense. What I mean by that is, for instance, I'm not a rap music fan myself, at least by and large. I mean, there are some that I like, but I'm not really a rap music fan. But when I hear that Usher song come on, like most people in the world who aren't insane, I turn up the volume. I like it. It's a good song. It's a hook. That hook, that repetitive melody, when the song's over, that you repeat to yourself is catchy. It's sing-alongable, to make up a word there that I can use right there. It's catchy. A hook works the same way. I might not agree with whatever your argument is that you're about to lay on me, which is why you don't start with that. But you use a hook to help draw your reader's attention and make it palatable even to somebody, or attractive to somebody who might not even agree with where you're going. But we do that through several ways. You can tell a story, a brief story. You can open with a joke. You can open with a fact that is very shocking. Obviously, it's going to tie in with where you're going, but it's something that I prefer when I'm writing. I prefer to use a story, an anecdote. That's what an anecdote means. It's a short little story. And for one reason, I do it because it takes up space. So some of you might be freaking out at the idea of having to do 4 to 5 pages. And so that's why I really strongly want to encourage that you use the anecdote method. We learned how to tell good story in Unit 1, narrative, and so you can tell a story that, and by tell a story, I mean it can be something made up, as an example. But you can be creative there, something that relates and that you think really draws on where you're intending to go and helps your reader relate to the material a little bit better. And so that's just an idea. It also takes up space as we get more complicated and complex in our writing. Your intro doesn't have to be 1 to 2 sentences, like I say here. Okay, 2 to 3 sentences for the ID, 4 to 5. I do that simply because I know that this is what you are drawing from, paragraphs being 1 to 7 sentences or something like that. So I like to kind of show you what you would be doing in each little part, but you can go beyond that. Okay, and in fact, it's really good that you start practicing going beyond that. So, I tell my students in a face-to-face class, let this be the opportunity to be creative. You can use up to a page, not it shouldn't go beyond the first page, but you can use up to a page to give me a good solid introduction. Why not? Why not? Because you're going to have to give me 4 pages to develop your argumentative paper, and so why not, knock out 1 page that way? So that's the hook. ID is simply, think of it as very similar to the elevator conversation. You just are briefly introducing the topic or identifying your topic and giving some background, and then finally laying down your thesis statement. Now, I want to talk about this because students typically have trouble with this ethos pathos logos, and so you can even sort of uh, you can sort of forget it for a second. Um, the main thing that I want you all to learn here is that we're being persuasive, right? This is the best approach, in my view, to form arguments. But what I'm really looking for in your thesis statement is your prompt, the position that you're taking on your prompt, and 3 main ways of arguing that you're going to examine to support your position. Now, whether that's ethos, pathos, logos is not really my main concern, but I want you to have 3 good reasons and arguments. I'm going to be, giving you feedback on your practice thesis, and so I'm going to help you guys formulate good theses there. But I just want you to know if you're having trouble making it, oh, is this really ethos that I'm using? If it's a good argument, I really don't care what it is. But I also wanted you all to be familiar with this because we use these in arguments whether we realize it or not. We do, so I just wanted y'all to get used to that language because that's what we do. That's what we see in our commercials and everyday life. There hardly is any argument that would not somehow fit under one of these uh, appeals. So you know, just just do your best, and I'm going to help you, especially in the thesis practice, get where it needs to be. So I will be giving feedback on the introductions later this week. Again, always look at your role. I'm not going to read that for you, but it sort of explains how you want to be envisioning the purpose of this section and what you're doing in this section. It sort of helps, visualize the tone that you need to be taking. Okay, so the body paragraphs, I do want to spend a good amount of time here. Um, so think of these more as sections. You can have several paragraphs in each section, okay? And you first want to start with sort of expanding your ID, that giving us a brief background and introducing your topic and telling us the problem and that kind of thing. This is really where you want to expand on that. Okay, you can use a lot of your rough draft free writing in this section because usually this is the type of response that we give when we do free writing on our prompt. Okay, it's just sort of reporting what the problem is. why it's a problem. We may not have necessarily formulated really good arguments yet. And so in this section, or you may have in your rough draft, but you won't want to use that in this first section of the body paragraphs. Here, think of yourself as a reporter. You're just trying to get the information out there. You're just trying to let the reader become aware and familiar with the topic enough that they understand this is something that needs to be addressed or something that needs to be thought about, so they understand what's going on. Um, Here, I suggest that you would use one of your sources in documenting, and we're going to learn about how to document properly in a journalistic fashion. Okay, this is not necessarily our academic style of documentation. That will be covered or should be covered mainly in Comp 2. But here it would be good to use a source that is providing the writer, with a lot of background info that you could report back to the reader. So it would be good to cite that source that gives you background info in this section. And then moving on, now I have used, you'll see in the outline template that we'll get back to if we have time, that there are different methods you could go about this. You can have a section listing all of your pro or for or yes, if you want to think of it that way, arguments in support of a yes position. Okay, and you can have an entire section, and let's say you have your three main arguments in your thesis that you're going to fully flesh out and examine here in the body paragraphs in this section. If you do three main paragraphs in pro, you could do it that way, and then give me three main paragraphs refuting the cons, because you're taking the position usually in favor, or if you're taking the position in opposition, that's fine too, and this would be vice versa. But you could think of it, this is called the block method. You're giving it a whole paragraph or a whole block of text and content that is for pro, and you could do it all in pro. So your thesis statement that you're going to expand upon, each three of those lines of arguments, you're giving all in pro, fleshing all three out, and then going con all three again. That's called the block method. You'll see that there's also something called the ping pong method. That's where you would handle your first argument from your thesis statement, giving the pros, and then in the same section, before you've moved on to the second argument, giving the con. So going back and forth, in other words. And then once you're done with the one argument that you've given the pros and the cons for the one argument, then you move on to the second argument from your thesis statement and giving the pros and the cons, and then the third. That's called the ping pong approach, going back and forth. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. It's up to you. There's literally no right or wrong with that at all, or no better way. Um, but just know what you're doing in each section. When you're going through the pros, follow our C formula for developing your paragraphs. State your main topic, or main idea for the paragraph. Give me examples. That's where you elaborate. You could give more stories. You could bring in your outside sources. You could, whatever it is you're doing, examining that argument further, breaking it down, and you can go on and on and on as long as you want. And then finally, wrap it up. Make sure you're connecting the dots for your readers and explaining the significance of the examples you provide so that it makes sense and drives your point home. In the pros, when you are arguing in favor of the position, you are going to act like you're a defense attorney. In other words, you are defending the position. Okay. Make sure, again, I'm not really concerned if you know what logical fallacies means per se. Just know that what we're looking to avoid is bias, or looking like you're swayed overly in one position. And the way that displays itself is through an attack. Now I'm going to pick up here in another video because I'm running out of time. These videos can only be 15 minutes.